Hi everybody. So we are going to continue with King David journey. The story I'm going to share with you today is in Samuel A, chapter 30. And this is a fascinating story. David, at the time, is not a king yet, is being challenged as always with extreme situation which we're going to explore today, and definitely very distressful, very challenging, and very much, as we're going to see, on the verge of causing deep anxiety. Not even on the verge, but actually deep anxiety that actually exists in that story, and how exactly David dealt with the situation. So as I mentioned, at that point of time, David is not a king yet. Is still a person that is running for his life. In previous episodes, we spoke about the fact that David was a hunted man. Shaul HaMelech, King Saul, wanted to kill him for a variety of different reasons. We'll revisit in the future that subject, but straight to the story here. At that point in time, David is no longer by himself. He has some family members that joined him, as again he's running away from his life, and actually has this small group of 600 people surrounding him. 600 people. The story goes like that. At that time, David was spending time in the southern part of Israel, called the Negev, basically again the south part of Israel, and he joined one of the Philistine kings named Achish. Achish was one of the kings of the Philistine nation. And David was asking him, listen, I'm hanging around with you, with your people, some of the Philistines, and I think maybe it's a good idea that you will give me a little town in the south of Israel where I can reside myself, David says, and the 600 people that are with me. And Achish, that king, says yes, and he gives him the city of Ziklag. Obviously, you don't have to remember the name, but also I told you the story is in Samuel 8, chapter 30. The city, little town of Ziklag, and David and his people residing there for a year, a little bit more than a year. But as always, there is always some kind of conflicts, military conflicts, nations fighting each other. Back then, Israel was full with so many ethnic groups, and David and his people left town for about 3 days, and they left the women and their kids alone. So basically, think about you leaving your house, you're traveling somewhere, and you leave your house, your home by itself. Only that in that case, no babysitters. David and his people left the women and the children at that town, reminding you that that town, Ziklag, in the southern part of Israel, was surrounded by other little nations, ethnic groups, which, how to say, were not exactly nice people, a little bit hostile. So the story develops like that. David and his people, the men, the warriors, the fighters, they had to go out. When they come back home 3 days after, they found to their amazement that the city was completely destroyed, burned down with fire by a nation called Amalek. Now, my friends, this nation of Amalek, this ethnic group, is a nation that we speak about or read about in the biblical stories. That will be mainly the Old Testament, since the 5 books of Moses, into the days of the prophets, and of course the days of King David. The Amalek people, or the story about the Amalek people, is much more than a story of a little nation that sometimes you have some conflicts and fighting with each other. But the deep secret, from an energetical point of view, Amalek represents doubt. They represent doubt and uncertainty in our lives. So back to the physical story, David and his people coming back to Ziklag, this little town, just to find that the city was burned down by Amalek, So now we understand that we're talking about a very distressful situation, like sometimes will happen in our lives, but very high level of anxiety that begin with this notion of uncertainty. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? I don't know what will happen in the future. The city is burned by the forces of uncertainty, if you like. Not only that that the city was burned down, but the females, yes, the women and the kids were kidnapped by the people of Amalek. And you can only imagine how the people, how the community led by David, how exactly they felt. Of course, the Bible is telling us, וישא דוד ועם את אשר איתו את כולם. I'm reading the original text in Hebrew. David and the people were completely shocked. They didn't know what to do with themselves. They're shocked, they're devastated, and they're crying. And the Bible is telling us something that I found to be amazing. I mean, it says here, עד אשר אין בהם כוח לבכות. They were weeping for so long and so strongly, crying and weeping, until they had no strength anymore to continue crying and weeping. They just spent all the tears. Emotionally, mentally, they were completely devastated. They just didn't know what to do with themselves. Again, so much so, they couldn't even cry anymore. Not only that, the women and their kids were all kidnapped, hijacked by the Amalek. And at that time, David had two wives, two women. One of them named Achinoam, and the other one is Abigail. David didn't have children with those two women yet, Achinoam and Abigail, but both of them, Abigail and Achinoam, was also kidnapped by the Amalek. So it's something again that David himself experienced and the people that are with him. Very, it says, ותצר לדוד מאוד. David was experiencing tremendous distress, but on top of everything, he is responsible for his own people. He feels their pain. His whole entire community, the warriors, the soldiers, the women and kids were kidnapped. His two wives / women were kidnapped. On top of everything, the people, those people that were with him, they experienced such high level of pain, they start accusing King David. Well, maybe you should have left some babysitters, metaphorically, for the city. Not really babysitters, but maybe some of the warriors, 10, 20 of them, could have stayed behind and protect and just make sure that nothing as such that will happen, right? So comes the point that not only they're accusing King David, but they want to stone him to death. So we see the accumulation of so many things. One can only imagine what David was experiencing. Distress, anxiety, uncertainty, not only for oneself, not only for himself, but his own people, that some of them now they want to turn their back on King David, maybe to hand him over to Saul, that anyway wanted to kill him, or just as it says, lesoklo, ki mara nefesh kol ha'am. Their soul, their spirit was very, very bitter, and now David has to deal with this entire situation. So first thing first, vayitchazek David b'Hashem Elokav. Always the concept of certainty, to whatever is your understanding of God, or however you perceive, comprehend, call it God, call it a higher force, call it energy, higher level of energy. David knew that he has to tap into a different reality. I'm not a scientist, but in the history of science, we know that in 1927, in Denmark, Copenhagen, they came up with, that's in modern physics, with Werner Heisenberg principle of uncertainty. You have it a little bit to a certain extent, and again, I'm not a scientist, but you can read and do your own research about it. In quantum physics, the element or the principle of uncertainty that is touching every aspect of our lives. Meaning in this physical reality, one is destined sooner or later to experience uncertainty. And specifically now, with this situation that David is experiencing, with the people, as we mentioned, some of them already want to kill him. The wives, the kids kidnapped, the city is completely destroyed. David turned to one of his helpers that was a very elevated soul, Eviatar Kohen, and they had some kind of access to this kind of a cosmic computer, if you like. David was connected upstairs because he realized there is a reality beyond above the physical realm, where uncertainty always ruling, and therefore eventually situations where he experienced distrust, distress, pressure, and definitely anxiety. So he turned to the person that is helping him, Eviatar, and they're using this cosmic computer called Ephod. David turns to the cosmic energy, the creator, God, however you want to call it, and he's asking, he wants to tap into this, if you like, metaphysical realm. Metaphysical, not necessarily even in the sense of esoteric, but understanding that there is something much bigger than what I see. Because if you don't tap into a higher level, higher frequency of energy, the anxiety, the stress won't disappear. And David gets the answer, yes. Arrange a little military force. In that case, it was 600 people, and you need to move on, offense. It's teaching us a lesson. We're not talking about attacking anybody else or being on the offense in a negative way, yes? But in life, what we see from the lesson from David, of course, after he understood the bigger picture, we cannot just stay like a sitting duck in a range, being victimized by uncertainty. For each one of us, maybe we're coming from different religions, different belief systems, but the last thing you want to do is to be victimized or just to be susceptible to this so-called Amalek, uncertainty. We need to take the different steps, different strategies, different tactics. In other words, to be proactive with developing this certainty and not waiting for the dark day, metaphorically, that will come, and maybe the anxiety, the depression will just pop out. So David now is on the offense. We'll develop these things in more episodes that I promise this time to share more and more. So it's going with this 600 people, but then they're getting to this little stream, river, creek. 200 from the 400 experiencing exhaustion. They're fatigued, not so much physically, more mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Basically they lost their faith. So they are saying to David, we have 600 people all together, 400 telling David, from that point, from this river, stream of water, we will continue with you into the battlefield of life, battling uncertainty, doing something about that stress, anxiety that exists in our lives. And 200 said, no, we're not up to we can't. We're too, again, spiritually, emotionally fatigued. We don't want to continue. And David says, fine. If you feel so exhausted, stay here. The 200 people, I will continue with the 400 that are together with me. As they're getting to the battlefield, they meet this Egyptian kid, maybe a teenager, and they feed him. They give him a cake, pelach devla, a fig cake, and raisins, and of course water and bread, just feeding him. And they investigating him. Yes, it's like you investigate the enemy, you want found one of the enemy soldiers, and you investigate, and the Egyptian kid is saying, I'm actually a servant of that Amalek guy. Reminding you, Amalek, it's not just people or a nation, it's a code for uncertainty. And he says, for 3 days I've been sick, and my master, the Amalek individual, left me here to die at the field. And then David is telling him, do me a favor. I want you to lead us into a place where we can ambush the enemy's troops, when we can ambush Amalek. It's another thing. When it comes to anxiety, stress, many times we are being ambushed. It means we are not really aware to the different situations in our lives. We are not aware. Maybe I've been a little bit lazy. Maybe I'm a little bit not doing what I'm supposed to do. And not on top of my game, sort of speaking. When we are feeling and we let it build up, being unmotivated, not interested in the game of life, whatever it means for you. Again, in the future, we'll get into more details. Maybe I used to have a hobby and I'm not following it anymore. I'm just not playing the game of life. I don't bring my best into the game, which is okay. We are human beings. We all have our ups and downs. But when we just let life go just, in front of my eyes, in front of our eyes, and we don't try to push anything, eventually this Amalek will appear. It's energy. It is energy. And the uncertainty will build up. So when the challenge is happening, I find myself in a mind space of experiencing anxiety. So David is saying, I don't want to be ambushed. I want to ambush. I want to be on top of my game. So please lead me maybe to a little wadi, maybe a set of caves because David was outnumbered. Yes, the enemy had much more numbers, many more people, but David understood that he needed to bring his top game to the battlefield. The Egyptian kid agreed. He just made this condition with David: please don't hand me over to these people that I was serving, to the Amalekim. And David says, okay, and he's very successful with his mission. David was able to ambush the forces of Amalek. Again, I want to remind you, the forces of Amalek, the forces of uncertainty. David brought his top game to the battlefield, and he's teaching us, maybe I cannot always bring my top game, but as much as I can, at least to be aware, ups and downs, yes, but be aware to that spiritual concept. The forces of uncertainty that exist within the physical realm will always ambush. And one of the biggest tricks is letting me feel that I'm in control, that everything is just fine, because things are just great right now, without noticing that I'm being ambushed. So David is doing the opposite. I have to make the booby traps. Maybe a daily meditation, maybe a daily conversation with, again, your perception of God. Maybe you read something, maybe you exercise, maybe, I don't know, yoga, whatever that helps you to bring your top game. Very, very important. With the understanding, and that's crucial, that there is a force, that's from the wisdom of Kabbalah, a force called uncertainty that is ambushing us. What is the nature of this ambushing game? Booby trapping the battlefield, metaphorically. It means we are not aware, we are not paying attention. It doesn't mean now I have to be afraid and to somebody is ambushing me. It's just simple consciousness and awareness that a force of uncertainty exists. David understands it very well. Throughout his entire life, he battled uncertainty. Here is only one of the examples. Jumping forward, ambushing the soldiers of the opponent, David was able to retrieve all the equipment, food, whatever the Amalekites were able to take from his people. But most important, David was able to retrieve, to bring back the prisoners, the women and the kids. Now, of course, don't take it literally, only women and kids. It can be anything or everything that we felt, that anxiety, that stress took away from us. And we want to bring it back as we build our certainty stronger and stronger. So David is able to bring the women, the kids, and of course the people are very happy. To finish that story, there is another little drama that is happening at the end of that story. They're coming back with the spoils, again with the wives and kids. And remember the 200 people that were left behind saying, I'm too tired, I'm afraid, maybe I won't do well in the battlefield, I don't want to be part of it. So when the warriors, the 400 coming back, of course, they brought also the family members, the women and the kids of the 200 that didn't participate in the fight. And they said, we've done for you more than what could be expected. We brought back your kids and wives, and that's good enough. But spoils, we're not going to share with you. And actually turning to David, he's the leader. David, we brought for them their families back, and we didn't even have to do that. But the rest of the things that we brought back, spoils if you like, we don't want to share. And David, as the leader, made a decision, an executive decision, and he says, I know these 200 people basically flaked on us. They didn't fight together with us, shoulder to shoulder. They are not brothers in arms, yes? But nevertheless, not only that we were very successful to bring their families back to them, but whatever spoils that we got, food and things that they took back from us, and now we're bringing it back, I am going to share it with the 200 people that flaked on us, even that they don't deserve it. So we see, if you like, a greater, for lack of a better expression, like a political understanding of the situation. David was always making sure, and will develop this idea also in the future, to exercise a great deal of forgiveness. Forgiveness is another tool to remove anxiety from our lives. David was exercising forgiveness so many times, but not only that, he was always looking, how can I bring the different parts of the people or conflicts, how can I bring it together? Yes, sometimes we have to fight. Sometimes we have to do something, yes? But after the fight is over, David was able to understand, I want to appease everybody. So he's telling the 400 people that actually spent some time with him in the battlefield, let's share with the 200 people that maybe they don't deserve it, but let's make them happy. We look into it, that situation a little bit again in the next episodes, so we can finish here that short video. We see here David using the force of certainty, and I promise we'll have more episodes, many of them about this subject of anxiety, of stress, and we'll develop it. But David is one of the most powerful historical examples. Yes, of course, wars happen and conflicts, but the extra value of David because is the fact that we're talking about a great leader, one of the greatest kings ever, but his life story that is documented, of course, in the Bible, in the writings, is so powerful, and there is also a very specific spatial energy in his soul that can assist us. So expect more videos. Really, I need to nail that channel with the King David, and I'll see you soon. All the best. Bye bye.